go ahead and deploy Azure File Sync. Azure File Sync is pretty straightforward. There's two things you need. You need an Azure File Sync service and you need a storage account. So let's go ahead and build both of those. So to begin, I'm going to create an Azure storage account. So I'll search the marketplace for storage and just create a standard storage account. Now there's nothing special about this storage account. Well, actually there's one thing special. Because Azure File Sync at the current point in time is in preview, we've got to have a storage account in one of the regions in which Azure File Sync is supported. So I'm just going to call this one CGH Azure File Sync. This is my storage account. And I'm going to create a new resource group called Sync. And I'm going to pick West US. West US is one of the regions where this is presently supported. So go ahead and create this pretty standard storage account. Now while that's creating in the background, I'm going to add an Azure File Sync. So I'm going to search for File Sync and click Create on that. And again, this is a pretty basic object. Call this one File Sync. I'm going to put it in the same resource group called Sync in West US. And we'll click Create and let that go ahead. So we'll let both of those objects get created, which is our storage account and our File Sync service. Okay, so both of those objects are now created. Close down these notifications and we're going to go over to all our resources. I'm just going to do a little filter here to pick things I've put in West US. And we can see we've got a couple of things here, and there's a few things here I'd created earlier. So actually, as a better way, let's just go by resource group. So we just see the objects we want to look at. So here's the storage account. Now the storage account simply needs a file share. So pretty straightforward. We've done this before. Files, new file share. Call this just Azure Files. The name obviously can be anything. It's just got to mean something to you. File share is now created, and that's all we need to do in the storage account. Let's come back to our File Sync service, and now we've got to do a couple of things. We've got to register our on-premise server, and we've got to configure the synchronization, which involves deploying and installing an agent. So to do these, we're going to begin by creating a sync group. I'm just going to call this group Profiles. And we're going to select the storage account that we actually want to sync with. So CGH Azure File Sync, and then we've got a share called Azure Files. And so this will create the sync group. Now, in order to proceed to the next step, we've got to register our on-premise file server. So this is a pretty simple process. It involves downloading and installing a 20 meg Azure Storage Sync agent. So I've RDP'd into my file server. This is my file server in my data center. And I've already downloaded it, and it's just sitting here on the desktop. And so we're just going to go through the installation wizard. You see it's going to, for this preview, deploy 3 scenarios: file sync, work folders, and then the assorted management tools. And this is a pretty simple wizard. You click next a couple of times, you click install, and it takes about 3-4 minutes to complete the installation. So we're just going to let this run, and we'll come back once the install has finished. Wizard's now complete. We'll click Finish. That installation is complete, and we're now going to complete the registration process. So to do this, I'm going to sign into my Azure account. And it will prompt me to pick the synchronization servers that I want to register this server in. So take just a second to query Azure, pick my subscription. It's going to go in and look at the subscription, find resource groups that are available, and then prompt me to choose the sync service that I want to register this server in. And we'll go ahead and click Register. Authenticate one more time, and we're done. So we've now done everything that we need to do on this server. It's worth noting that there's one prerequisite that, again, in just preparing this, you do need to have the Azure PowerShell commandlets installed on this machine. Now I've already done that and I've already downloaded the agent, so those basic prerequisites were met. If you go to do this for the first time on a brand new server, it's going to prompt you to do those things, so you're not going to forget. But again, you've got to have the Azure PowerShell commandlets downloaded, and as well as install the sync agent. So this file server is now ready. If we refresh, we can see that we've now got a registered server. So our next step is to go back to our sync group and actually configure a file folder on that server to synchronize with our Azure file share. And this is referred to as an endpoint. So I'm going to add a server endpoint, pick my registered server, and specify a path. And the path I'm going to choose, and this has to be a valid local path on the server called file server, and I just named it C Azure Files. Go ahead and click create, and it will go create that endpoint. Now, if I go back to my server and look at my C drive, and we're just going to refresh. And there we go. We can see that new folder called Azure Files has been created. Now, it's not shared locally on the server. It's up to me as the administrator to do that. But this file folder is now in sync with my Azure file share. And to kind of prove that point, I'm just going to grab some files. Let me just grab another folder here. And we're just going to go see Windows System 32 drivers. And we're just going to grab a bunch of driver files. And we're going to copy paste those directly into this Azure Files folder. So they'll paste in pretty quick. And what's going to happen is behind the scenes, it will trigger to synchronize the contents of this local folder with my Azure file share. And to do that, let's actually go back to my Azure file share. So back to my storage account, back to Files, and click Azure Files. And we'll see now that we're beginning to get these files start to trickle into this file share. There they are. There's the first batch, the second batch, and so on. So now we know that this Azure file sync has been deployed and it's working properly. If I were to delete something on the Azure file share, it would delete it on the file server. And I can actually go around now and add multiple file servers this and use the Azure file share as a distribution point to make sure that all these files are distributed across all the file servers in my environment. So that's your look at how to configure and deploy Azure File Sync.